Hi again. Let's continue talking about typography. So here I have some text, and I'm just going to say, even though it's probably too small to read in the video, that this text just doesn't read very well. Okay, what's wrong? Well, first of all, the lines are too long, so you want to avoid long lines of type. If the type goes all the way across the page, people are not going to have an easy time reading it. Okay. Next, there's no line spacing, so the lines are pretty close together, okay? And that makes the text hard to read. It's especially important to have more line spacing when the lines are really long, okay? So this, if the text is shorter, if the line length is shorter, that they can be closer together, maybe vertically, right? But on long lines, we really want to get a little more space. Third, the contrast here is pretty harsh, right? It's like black and white. Like we've got the two most extreme colors that we can get. Just doesn't make for a pleasant reading experience. So what can we do? Well, first of all, let's go to our page here. So this is the page that I've created. It's got two paragraphs and an H1, right? And there's a div around them. So why don't we corral in our text, right? So let's use div here. Oops, div. And let's give it a style. We'll give it a width of, I don't know, 600, right? Okay. And then we can do margin auto to just put it in the middle of the page for convenience. Okay, so that reads a little bit better. I mean, just it's a little bit improved there. Still, the lines are a little too close together, and I feel the type is a little bit small. I mean, I can zoom in on the browser here, but let's say this is the regular size, but I think in the browser, I'd want to make the text a little bit bigger. And I know in the video you won't be able to really read this, but just go with me. Do it for yourself, right? I think this is a little bit small. So let's go into our page, and probably the best way to set your fonts or work with fonts for an entire web site is to go to the body tag and set a default font size. So let's imagine that I want the font size to be, like, I think by default it's about 16 pixels. Let's make it 18 or 20. Okay, maybe we'll go with 18. Okay, and when I set the font size here on the body tag, everything inside the body tag will inherit that font size. So some CSS properties are inherited, okay? So some elements have inherit, and that means that they get the property from their parent or their ancestor, okay? Font size and font family and color are all like that, okay? So when we set font to 18 points on, or 18 pixels on the body tag, everybody inside the body tag is going to get this font size, okay? Now, you can see that's a little bit bigger, right? So that reads a little better now. Maybe 20 would have been good, but we'll go with this, right? You'll notice the H1 is not 18 pixels, it's bigger, and that's because the H1 has a font size that's set in M's, I think, and so when it inherits the font size, it's a multiple of that font size. And I forget what this is. It's like 1.5 or 2 times what the regular font size is. So this is always going to be bigger, but if we increase the font size here, the H1 will increase proportionally. Okay, so that's kind of okay for us, right? Okay, so what else can we do here? Well, why don't we set a default color for all the fonts on our page? So the best way, again, to do that is to set it on the body tag, right? So if you have a color that you're using for your fonts on your page, set it on the body tag, and then every element on the page is going to inherit it. And this is much easier than setting the color on the div and setting the color on the paragraph and setting the color for the H1. Instead of setting the color 3, 4, 5 times, why don't you just do it once on the body tag? And then if you have a couple instances where the color is different, for those instances you can just set the color on a class or something, right? Okay, so let's give this a color. Let's make it not black. Let's make it like a dark gray but not black. Maybe we'll make it 555. That's kind of a dark medium gray. So that reads a little better, right? A little less harsh on the eyes, right? It'll be a little easier if we make the background color a little darker, right? So why don't we set the background color here to be something a little bit darker than just white, right? Oh, so that's kind of reading a little better. Now let's talk about the line height, okay? So So what are we going to do here? Let's go get our paragraphs. Okay, so we'll style the paragraphs and we'll give them a line height. And we could actually set the line height here in the body tag too. So, you could set this for everything there. Maybe that's actually a good idea. This line height maybe we want to set specifically for some things, but why don't we just have everybody inherit the line height? So now the line height is usually, it's about 1 em. Okay, so it's about 1 em. And you can see actually it's a little smaller, so maybe it was like 1.2 or 1.15 ems, right? So that's really tight, a little too hard to read. Why don't we go in here and set it to 1.5 ems, okay? And then now that's starting to look a little more legible. Maybe this is a little too big. A good way to do this, I'm doing it here in the HTML so you can see the property names. But if you're working on your own websites and you're trying to work on the type and details in the website, I recommend going to the inspector and then inspecting the element that you want to style. Find your properties here, right, in the inspector, and then just adjust the properties here. So maybe this 1.5 is maybe a little too much. Maybe 1.25, 1.35, right, something like that. And then maybe the font size was a little too small. Maybe I'll make it 20 points. Yeah, that looks kind of good to me, right? And if you've changed your styles and you like them, usually in the inspector it'll say where the style is located. So here you can see I'm in type1.html, and this means line 7, right? And so, I can actually just copy the styles here, right? And then go to my style sheet, find line 7, and oh, there they are, and I can just paste them. And now that I've got my styles in the browser and I know what they look like there, I can just paste those styles into my style sheet and then go back to the browser, and when I refresh, I've got the same settings, right? So anyway, so maybe that'll help you out getting your type to look a little better. Good luck with that. Just one more note, when you're using sans serifs in general, they don't read that great. Probably better to use when you're using a serif font, they usually don't read that great. Probably better to use a sans serif. So, why don't we, as a last step, say, oops, I did font feature. I meant to do font family. Let's do font family Helvetica, right? Something like that. There's a classic font family for you. We can do Helvetica, and that reads pretty good. Sometimes the font weight is a little too heavy with that, right? But anyway, so that looks good. Good luck with your type, and hopefully that gives you some ideas on how to play with type and get it to read a little better. I think I need a little more line spacing there now with Helvetica.